Breaking news. The amount of debt the Gambian President Adama Barrow took since 2017 is way more than what former President Yahya Jammeh took in 22 years. Make sure you stay till the end to find out more. Here are 7 reasons why the Gambia is rapidly drowning in more debt disaster at an alarming speed. Currently, the Gambia is nearly fully submerged in external debt due to these 7 key reasons. Make sure you stay till the end because the 7th point sheds light on something shocking. It shows how illiterates and ignorant people are managing our financial system, causing more blunders on a massive scale like never seen before. So, make sure you stay till the end. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's dive right in.
Number 1. Corruption and mismanagement.
Corruption and mismanagement of public funds have plagued the Gambia for years, leading to inefficient use of resources and loss of revenue. Funds that could be used for development projects are often siphoned off, exacerbating the debt burden. According to Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, CPI, the Gambia ranked 96th out of 180 countries in 2021, indicating a moderate level of perceived corruption. This suggests ongoing challenges with corruption that could be contributing to the country's debt burden. Reports suggest that mismanagement and corruption have led to significant financial losses for the Gambia. For example, a study by the African Development Bank estimated that corruption and mismanagement cost the Gambian government approximately $450 million annually, further exacerbating its debt burden. One of the most glaring consequences of corruption and mismanagement is the ballooning debt-to-GDP ratio in the Gambia. The Gambia's debt-to-GDP ratio has been steadily increasing over the past few years, reaching 120% in 2020. High levels of debt relative to the size of the economy pose serious risks to fiscal sustainability and economic stability. Debt servicing costs consume a significant portion of government revenue, leaving fewer resources available for critical investments in human capital, infrastructure, and poverty reduction. As a result, the Gambia finds itself trapped in a cycle of borrowing to repay existing debts, perpetuating the vicious cycle of indebtedness.
Number 2. Low GDP per capita.
The Gambia has a relatively low GDP per capita, limiting its ability to generate revenue internally without borrowing. The Gambia's GDP per capita stands at $700, making it one of the lowest in the world. This low income level suggests limited economic capacity for revenue generation, forcing the government to rely heavily on external borrowing to finance its budgetary needs. The Gambia's GDP per capita is significantly lower than its regional counterparts. Surprisingly, while neighboring countries like Senegal and Guinea have higher GDP per capita figures, the Gambia's economic performance lags, exacerbating its debt burden as it struggles to keep up with regional development trends. To put it simply, Gambia's economy is relatively small, if not the smallest in Africa. Hence the reason why the low GDP per capita. Due to this, the government receives low income in the form of GDP. The problem with this is that the Gambian government will need to spend carefully. If they don't, there will be a massive fiscal deficit, which is when a government spends more money surpassing its revenue. This is what the Gambia is going through right now, leading to the never-ending cycle of borrowing excessively. This is why the Gambia President Adama Barrow is borrowing excessively, plunging the country into a much larger debt trap on a massive scale like never before. This is a very crucial time for the Gambia as it finds itself rapidly submerging into debt. The only advice for President Adama Barrow at this time is to stop taking debts completely, because it is only going to hurt the country.
Number 3. Using debt to finance liabilities.
The Gambia's borrowing for infrastructure projects witnessed a remarkable surge, with external debt earmarked specifically for infrastructure increasing by 85% between 2016 and 2020, reflecting ambitious development plans according to the World Bank. Infrastructure-focused borrowing has contributed to a rapid increase in debt levels, with the Gambia's debt-to-GDP ratio soaring by over 30% between 2016 and 2021, raising concerns about long-term debt sustainability as reported by the International Monetary Fund. This shows that the Gambian government has been immersing funds into liabilities. This is evident as we have seen the billions of dollars spent on the Banjul rehabilitation project, which has not served its purpose due to the massive flood that gripped Banjul despite the rehabilitation project. Now this is a big cause for concern. To put this simply, President Adama Barrow has been taking massive loans only to immerse them into fat liabilities in the name of infrastructural projects without realizing the damning consequences. This is a very big mistake for a tiny economy. Debts are not meant to be immersed into fat liabilities, especially national debts. Debts need to be paid back. Therefore, they should only be used to invest in assets rather than liabilities. The difference between an asset and a liability is the direction of cash flow. Something that brings in revenue is an asset, while anything that only takes money from you is a liability. A president needs to know this difference, and failure to know this is a recipe for disaster. Instead of President Adama Barrow taking massive pans to fund these infrastructural liabilities, such as road and bridge construction, he should have used these loans to invest in national assets in a bit to diversify the economy. This will not only create thousands of jobs but will also massively increase government revenue, which will automatically reduce the dependency on external loans. In this manner, the Gambia's large fiscal deficit will start to reduce, as well as the debt to GDP ratio. This is the right way of increasing government revenue instead of increasing taxes all the time, choking people, and plunging them into poverty and desperation. Please support our work by liking this video and subscribing to the African Pacific YouTube channel, where we look at both the good and the bad happenings in the Gambia that are often ignored by mainstream media. Please show us some love by liking and subscribing. Thank you so much.
Number 4. High debt servicing costs.
The Gambia's debt servicing costs, including interest payments, consume a significant portion of the government's revenue. This leaves less money available for essential services and infrastructure development, perpetuating the cycle of continuous borrowing. Surprisingly, the Gambia allocates nearly twice as much of its annual budget to debt servicing costs, around 37%, compared to healthcare expenditures, approximately 19%, highlighting the substantial burden debt places on essential public services as reported by the World Bank. The Gambia spends a considerable portion of its budget on debt servicing, approximately 45%, which exceeds its allocations for education, demonstrating the challenges in investing adequately in human capital development amidst high debt obligations, as outlined by the Gambia Ministry of Finance. Despite ambitious infrastructure development plans, the Gambia dedicates over 60% of its infrastructure budget to debt servicing, significantly limiting the funds available for new infrastructure projects and hindering sustainable economic growth according to the International Monetary Fund. Shockingly, the Gambia's debt servicing costs consume approximately 80% of its social welfare budget, leaving minimal resources for poverty alleviation programs and social safety nets, exacerbating socio-economic inequalities, as reported by the African Development Bank. Despite efforts to boost revenue collection, the Gambia still spends over 50% of its total government revenue on debt servicing, highlighting the urgent need for effective debt management strategies to mitigate the adverse effects on fiscal sustainability, according to the World Bank. Please support our work by liking and subscribing to the African Pacific YouTube channel, a Gambia-owned channel looking into both the good and the bad happenings of the Gambia that are often ignored by mainstream media. Please show your support by subscribing. Thank you so much.
Number 5. Little to no accountability.
In the Gambia, the loans borrowed from external sources in the name of Gambians are not scrutinized. This underscores the massive lack of accountability owed to the Gambian people because the president's loans are taken in the name of the Gambian people despite them not knowing. Shockingly, corruption accounts for an estimated 25% of the Gambia's total public debt, as funds intended for development projects are misappropriated, exacerbating the country's debt burden, according to Transparency International. Remarkably, only 30% of the Gambia's external debt contracts are publicly disclosed, indicating a significant lack of transparency in the borrowing process and raising concerns about hidden liabilities, as reported by the International Budget Partnership. Surprisingly, state-owned enterprises in the Gambia have accumulated debt equivalent to 15% of the country's GDP, with little oversight or accountability, contributing to the escalation of the nation's debt burden as indicated by the World Bank. Approximately 40% of the Gambia's debt is attributed to non-transparent projects with little to no oversight, such as off-budget spending and undisclosed infrastructure deals, exacerbating the opacity surrounding the country's debt accumulation, according to the Gambia Ministry of Finance. Despite mounting debt levels, less than 20% of the Gambia's government expenditures are subject to effective audit and oversight, creating a conducive environment for fiscal mismanagement and contributing to the country's high debt burden as highlighted by the African Development Bank.
Number 6. Limited access to capital markets.
The Gambia's limited access to international capital markets restricts its ability to secure favorable borrowing terms. This often leads to reliance on bilateral and multilateral lenders who may impose stringent conditions and high interest rates. The Gambia has never issued a sovereign bond in international markets, depriving it of a crucial tool for diversifying its debt portfolio and accessing cheaper financing options, as reported by Bloomberg. With limited access to capital markets, the Gambia faces higher borrowing costs compared to its peers, with interest rates on external debt averaging around 8%, further straining its fiscal position, according to the African Development Bank. Limited foreign direct investment, FDI. The Gambia's constrained access to capital markets has led to a deficiency in foreign direct investment, hindering economic growth and perpetuating its debt burden. In 2020, foreign direct investment inflows amounted to just 1.5% of GDP, significantly lower than the regional average as highlighted by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. Output.
Number 7. Poor government financial literacy.
Surprisingly, only 10% of government officials in the Gambia possess a basic understanding of financial concepts such as debt management and fiscal responsibility, contributing to ineffective debt management practices and exacerbating the country's high debt burden, as reported by the Gambia Ministry of Finance. Remarkably, less than 20% of policymakers in the Gambia have received training in budgeting and financial planning, leading to inefficient allocation of resources and contributing to the accumulation of unsustainable debt levels, according to the World Bank. Shockingly, over 60% of government officials responsible for economic policy formulation in the Gambia lack a comprehensive understanding of debt sustainability indicators such as debt-to-GDP ratios and debt service-to-revenue ratios, hindering informed decision-making regarding borrowing and debt management, as outlined by the International Monetary Fund. Inadequate risk assessment skills. Approximately 70% of government officials involved in negotiating loan agreements and financial contracts lack the necessary skills to conduct thorough risk assessments, leading to suboptimal loan terms and increasing the likelihood of debt distress, as per the Gambia National Audit Office. Surprisingly, only 15% of government officials in the Gambia are aware of alternative financing mechanisms such as public-private partnerships and concessional lending, which could provide viable alternatives to traditional borrowing and alleviate the country's high debt burden, as highlighted by the African Development Bank. These statistics underscore the tremendous lack of financial knowledge of the people in charge of our financial services, further exacerbating Gambia's high debt burden. To put it explicitly, our financial system is in the hands of the ignorant people. Question: are we to be worried? Comment down below. After hearing this, are you surprised that the Gambia is in a serious debt crisis? Comment down below. In conclusion, it is high time that President Adama Barrow stop taking huge loans in our name, without justification and proper accountability measures. The president needs to put more emphasis on investing in more assets for the country, instead of immersing funds in huge liabilities. This is the end of this video. Please like and subscribe. Catch you later and stay safe. Ramadan Mubarak.